The night of August 20th, 1989 started like any other in the affluent Los Angeles suburb of Beverly Hills. The streets were quiet, the air was still, and the luxurious homes stood as silent sentinels under the starry sky. Behind the closed doors of their mansion, however, a horrifying scene was about to unfold. The Menendez family, known for their wealth and social standing, was about to be thrust into a nightmare that would forever alter their lives. José and Kitty Menendez, a successful entertainment executive and his wife, relaxed in their den, unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. They had spent the evening watching television, enjoying the comforts of their opulent home, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing within their own family. Their sons, Lyle and Erik, aged 21 and 18, were about to commit an act that would shatter the illusion of normalcy and plunge their family into a vortex of violence and despair. The brothers, driven by a complex web of emotions and motivations, had spent weeks planning the unthinkable. The quiet of the evening was shattered by the deafening roar of gunshots. The tranquility of the night was replaced by chaos and bloodshed as the brothers executed their plan with chilling precision. Neighbors, startled by the unexpected intrusion of violence into their peaceful enclave, would later recount the chilling sounds that pierced the night. The gunshots echoed through the neighborhood, leaving a trail of fear and confusion in their wake. Little did they know that they were bearing witness to a crime that would become one of the most sensationalized and debated murder cases in American history: the brutal slaying of José and Kitty Menendez at the hands of their own sons. The trial that followed captivated the nation, as details of the family's dark secrets and the brothers' motivations were laid bare for all to see. The Menendez case would go on to spark intense discussions about family dynamics, wealth, and the pressures of living up to societal expectations, leaving an indelible mark on the American psyche. As darkness gave way to the first light of dawn, the tranquility of the suburban neighborhood was shattered. The Menendez residence, usually a hub of early morning activity, remained uncharacteristically silent. The absence of any movement or sound was a chilling harbinger of the gruesome discovery that awaited inside. The stillness was almost palpable, as if the house itself was holding its breath. When concerned friends and neighbors were unable to reach the family, their worry grew. They called repeatedly, knocked on the doors, but there was no response. Their unease turned into alarm, prompting them to alert the authorities. This set in motion a chain of events that would soon expose the full horror of what had transpired behind the mansion's imposing facade. The police arrived expecting perhaps a simple welfare check, but what they found was far from routine. Police officers, responding to what they initially believed to be a routine welfare check, were met with a scene of unimaginable carnage. The air inside the house was thick with the metallic scent of blood, and the silence was deafening. The lifeless bodies of José and Kitty Menendez lay sprawled on the floor of their den, riddled with bullets. The sheer brutality of the crime was evident in the number of shots fired and the state of the room. Bullet holes peppered the walls, and crime scene markers dotted the floor around pools of blood. The sheer number of shots fired painted a picture of a cold-blooded execution rather than a crime of passion. It was a scene that would haunt the responding officers for years to come. The investigation into the double homicide of José and Kitty Menendez had begun. Detectives combed through the house, looking for any clues that could explain the senseless violence. At the heart of the investigation lay a perplexing question: who could have committed such a heinous act against this seemingly perfect family? The detectives knew that the answer would not come easily, and that the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. They would have to piece together the fragments of a shattered family to uncover the truth. In the wake of their parents' murders, Lyle and Erik Menendez became instant millionaires, inheriting their parents' considerable wealth and assets. However, instead of displaying the expected signs of grief and mourning, the brothers embarked on a lavish spending spree that raised eyebrows and fueled suspicions among those who knew them. Expensive cars, designer clothes, high-end watches. Lyle and Erik seemed determined to live life in the fast lane, seemingly unburdened by the recent tragedy that had befallen their family. They frequented exclusive clubs, dined at the finest restaurants, and indulged in extravagant purchases, their behavior a stark contrast to the image of bereaved sons struggling to come to terms with the loss of their parents. Their conspicuous consumption, a macabre display of newfound wealth, struck many as callous and insensitive, further deepening the mystery surrounding the murders and casting a long shadow of suspicion over the brothers themselves. Section 4. Whispers of abuse. Seeds of doubt emerge. As the investigation into the murders of José and Kitty Menendez progressed, a disturbing narrative began to emerge. Lyle and Erik, under the weight of mounting evidence and intense scrutiny from law enforcement, confessed to the killings but claimed they had acted in self-defense after years of suffering horrific abuse at the hands of their parents. Their claims, shocking in their detail and gravity, painted a picture of a household held captive to a cycle of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The brothers alleged that their father, a domineering and controlling figure, had subjected them to years of physical and psychological torment, while their mother, complicit in her silence, had turned a blind eye to their suffering. These allegations, if true, presented a powerful motive for the murders, casting the brothers not as cold-blooded killers, but rather as victims themselves, driven to desperate measures to break free from the clutches of their abusers. Section 5. The First Trial, A Nation Divided. The first trial of Lyle and Erik Menendez, which began in 1993, captivated the nation and became a media sensation. The case was not just another criminal trial, it was a spectacle that drew the attention of millions. The media coverage was relentless, with every detail of the trial being broadcasted on television and splashed across newspaper headlines. People were glued to their screens, eager to catch the latest updates and developments. The prosecution presented a case of premeditated murder, arguing that the brothers had killed their parents out of greed and a desire to inherit their wealth. They meticulously laid out the timeline of events, showing how Lyle and Erik had planned the murders, purchased the weapons, and executed their plan with cold precision. The evidence was damning, and the prosecution painted a picture of two young men driven by avarice and a thirst for luxury. The defense, on the other hand, sought to portray Lyle and Erik as victims of long-term abuse, driven to the unthinkable act of parricide in a desperate attempt to protect themselves from further harm. They presented a harrowing narrative of a household filled with fear, pain, and suffering. The defense argued that the brothers had endured years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of their parents, and that the murders were a tragic culmination of their desperate need to escape their tormentors. The courtroom became a battleground of conflicting narratives, with both sides presenting compelling arguments and evidence to support their case. The tension was palpable, and the atmosphere was charged with emotion. Each day brought new revelations and dramatic testimonies, keeping the audience on the edge of their seats. The trial was not just a legal proceeding, it was a gripping drama that unfolded in real time. The prosecution highlighted the brothers' lavish spending spree after the murders as evidence of their greed and lack of remorse. They showed how Lyle and Erik had gone on a shopping spree, buying luxury cars, expensive clothes, and even a restaurant. This, they argued, was proof that the brothers were motivated by money and had no qualms about enjoying their newfound wealth. The defense countered with harrowing accounts of abuse, supported by testimony from friends, relatives, and therapists who had interacted with the brothers over the years. They brought in witnesses who recounted disturbing stories of the brothers' childhood, painting a picture of a life filled with terror and pain. The defense argued that the brothers' actions were a desperate cry for help, a last-ditch effort to free themselves from a life of unimaginable suffering. The jury, tasked with the daunting responsibility of sifting through the conflicting accounts and rendering a verdict, faced an impossible dilemma. Were Lyle and Erik Menendez cold-blooded killers or victims of abuse driven to a desperate act? The weight of their decision was immense and the pressure was palpable. They had to consider the evidence, the testimonies, and the emotional weight of the case. The nation watched with bated breath, waiting to see how this tragic and complex story would unfold. Section 6. Deadlocked, the jury's indecision. After months of testimony, intense media scrutiny, and agonizing deliberation, the jury in the first Menendez brothers trial was hopelessly deadlocked, unable to reach a unanimous verdict on any of the charges against the brothers. The judge, faced with the jury's impasse, declared a mistrial, leaving the case unresolved and the question of the brothers' guilt or innocence unanswered. The mistrial, while a procedural necessity, did little to quell the public's insatiable appetite for information about the case. The Menendez brothers, their faces plastered across newspapers and television screens, became household names, their story a source of endless fascination and debate. Were they victims of abuse who had finally snapped under the weight of their parents' tyranny, or were they calculating killers who had skillfully manipulated the system to escape justice? The mistrial, far from providing closure, only deepened the mystery surrounding the case, leaving a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the brothers' fate.